Belinda Waymouth talks about all things planetary and environmentally related on Thursdays with us. And welcome, Belinda. I was saying there's both the good and the bad of climate today.
Yeah, it's definitely the good and the bad. But I think we have to focus on the expectations are way better, and we're in a completely different place than we were 5 years ago. The way I keep saying on the show, we are headed in the right direction, and we truly are. So I think we have to, give ourselves. I mean, we can't give ourselves a pat on the back, but I think we have to focus on that, because where we are now, in comparison to where we thought we were going to be or where we're headed, is way better. And I'm not discounting what Kim just, told us in the news about all these glaciers that are going to be gone by 2050. Things aren't
I don't
good.
know. I don't think glaciers is a word, but I will ding it. Glaciers, I know. I mean, I get it. You're not from this country originally, and you have that cute accent, but you don't have to rub it in our face all the time.
Oh, I just can't help myself. It's how the words come out of my mouth. So
I love it. So but it is the case that these glaciers are going away, or glaciers are going away at it's an insane pace. It's like we've fallen off the ledge.
Well, here's the thing. We are sort of falling off the ledge. I mean, when you look at, the heat waves that are happening, the droughts, I mean, the flooding in Pakistan, I mean, it was just terrible. But let me back up and let me say.
Sorry, you're saying despite that, you're saying even though that's all happening, you were making a point.
Yeah,
I apologize.
That's all happening. But where scientists thought we were heading, 5 years ago. So, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has been coming out with, their reports, every year. And the worst case scenario, it's called business as usual, which a lot of scientists thought was really where we were headed. We were going to keep burning, copious quantities of terrible coal. And the planet was going to heat up between 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. And by 2100. And that mark was going to be absolutely apocalyptic. It was going to be terrible. But now what everyone is saying is like, hey, it's not going to be that. We're going to heat up between 2 to 3 degrees. That's not good either, but it's half of where they had really, really thought we were going. And those numbers were really predicated on what had happened in China. We saw this huge nation industrialize and get rich, and they did it all on coal. And so the world expected the scientists said, hey, this is what's going to happen in India and all these other countries that are, set to industrialize. And we will heat up by this crazy amount, this 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. Now, what was agreed in Paris at COP25 back in 2015 was that really the safe number was 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're already at 1.2, and we can see what's happening. California's on fire. This summer, I think it was over 100 people died in Phoenix in the heat waves. I mean, the deaths in England, Portugal, and Spain, they lost over 1,000 people respectively in those, 3 countries with the heat. And we don't even know in China how many people died, because they had crazy heat waves. But, China keeps very secret about the bad stuff that's going on, how many people died of COVID, what happened with the heat.
Well, not to mention those, but just, we're talking about, those are heat-related deaths, but of course there are deaths related to, as you've suggested, flooding. There's also a fleeing of climate change results. That is to say, the results of climate change have made many, for example, crop-growing regions in the world no longer arable in terms of the land being in any way usable. So that's forced these migrations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the ripple effects, and I'm talking about deaths, they're beyond just the heat. I know you know this, but I'm just saying, gosh, I mean, we're talking about the heat, and when you factor in all the deaths to climate change annually, I mean, the number is very, very big.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that's crazy is, fossil fuels, kill up to 8 million people annually every year. So what's really exciting, because we've talked, that's the terrible part, but what's really exciting and what has happened in the last 5 years, and why we're in this different place as far as our expectation goes, is the shift to renewables, as I say over and over again, is happening. And the cost of them and the technology, it's just, growing exponentially. And so, I mean, I tweeted a story this morning about, solar power plants are going to be 10 times cheaper to run than gas ones, new European Union research shows. And the fact is that, the cost of solar and lithium batteries in the last 12 years, it's dropped by 85%. The cost of wind has gone down by 55%. So renewable electricity is just going to be cheaper. And that's why we're having this huge shift towards it. I mean, wind already is providing 6% of the world's electricity. China, which, burnt all this coal, I mean, they already are set, in the very near future to have as much solar power electricity generation as the rest of the world combined, just China alone. And the US is also planning to have that much solar. That's in our future, that we will have the same amount of solar, on US soil as the rest of the world has, and China going from, burning all this coal, they're now producing 85% of the world's solar panels, half the electric vehicles in the world are coming from China. So there's been this, this massive shift is happening. And of course, the market, which, likes money and is governed by money. I mean, this year, investments in renewable energies have exceeded those in fossil fuels. So that is huge. And then the other part of it is what's happened with public policy. We've got elected officials who are being pressured by their voters. You've got young protesters, throwing soup, cans of soup onto paintings, gluing themselves to paintings. And then the other thing is nations are making the shift to renewables because of self-interest. They want to still be nations. That's why China is doing what they're doing with renewables. China has, 5-year, 10-year plans. They want to be around. And, I mean, you look at our country, 5 years ago, we had a climate denier as our president, And
well, I was going to say that, I mean, public policy and governmental policy changes. It's become, in this country, disposed toward making some real climate movement toward, an aggressive movement at that, toward renewables and toward a fleet of electric government vehicles. I'm talking about postal vehicles, for example. I mean, that was floated. That's a whole other controversy. But anyway, I think you're right. I mean, there is an ebb and flow about public policy, and the drill baby drill people are about to take over again. So you're maybe 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you point to a lot of things going on in the world that perhaps aren't encumbered by the sort of thing that we have in this country, where we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But you can see in Ukraine the need for more traditional fuel that isn't alternative energy, and you've just seen that the nuclear plant in Ukraine now has been thrown offline again, and now they're on a backup power. They're on backup generators, and so you see how our movement toward renewables is a pained one worldwide. Yeah. Yeah. It's informed by flourishing economies and then hard hit economies that can't do as much with alternative. But as you say, ultimately there'll be no choice.
Yeah, there will be no choice, and it's happening. It's happening sort of in spite of this, sort of holding on to the old ways, because obviously we don't like, change. And there's all this infrastructure around fossil fuels, and there are all these, very rich people who want to, stay very rich. I mean, the thing that's wild was, OPEC came out with a story. I think it was just a couple of days ago, saying, demand for fossil fuels it's going up, it's going to happen. And of course, OPEC wants that to happen.
Sure. No, I mean, they have an interest in the interruption of the supply, and you're right. I mean, traditional oil companies and OPEC being the collection, probably the most powerful collective regarding oil and energy, they certainly want the price of a barrel of oil to be high. So they've cut back on supply. I want to mention something in the chat. Mackay, who's a regular listener, methane from cows does not contribute to climate issues. Cows have been flatulating for centuries. Flatulating is a ding word. For centuries and no problems. Plus, you're eliminating farming. I think this must be in relation to Mackay. I would just speak to that, and then I'll get out of the way. We'll let Belinda speak to it. The kind of scaling up of industrial agriculture that we've seen in the modern era has totally changed that statement. Oh, cows have been flatulating for generations. You have never had the kind of scaling up of industrial farming the way you have it now. And as a result, it's absolutely not in dispute that this is the greatest ripple effect in the world of climate change, that of industrial agriculture and animals. It's a fact. Now, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, Belinda, but I'm fairly certain that's the case.
Well, one thing, it's not about flatulating, it's about burps, not farts. So it's the cow burps that are producing wrong things. We shouldn't be feeding them corn. They need to be eating, grass. They're ungulates, which means hooved animals that, that eat grass, not, all these terrible grains that we feed them. And yes, there are way too many of them. So they definitely are, contributing. I mean, agriculture is a huge part of it. And it's not just the cows, it's, what we're doing to the soil and all the CO2 that's coming out of the soil as we, till it, and then all the fertilizer and additives that we add. Yeah, we need to be moving to a more plant-based diet. And I mean, I'm from New Zealand, and all they're talking about there is please halve the herd, because all the dairy cows that we have in New Zealand are wrecking it. I mean, it's awful. But I just wanted to.
Ungulates is a ding word, by the way, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. So I just wanted to also, before we run out of time, I really need to, talk about, yes, we're on a better path as far as our expectations go. And we are absolutely in the driver's seat as far as lowering emissions, because the fact is we have not started lowering emissions. We're heading in the right direction, but they're saying, emissions will, there'll be a peak number this year, there'll be a peak number next year. We are not headed in the right direction yet, but we're on our way there. So that is the exciting news. But we also, we're going to be in this, incredible sort of period of adaptation now, because there are going to be more floods. The world is going to become more precarious, and we need to mobilize. And it's, as I've sort of said on the show before, as we, did for World War I and World War II, people mobilized and they came together as, communities. And the other thing I think that's really important is what a lot of research is showing right now, because, you have these climate deniers saying, it's a hoax and it costs too much to change. Well, the fact is it's actually going to be not a net cost, but a net benefit when we really make this pivot to renewables. All the jobs that are going to be created, as we, really move to, to wind and solar and renewables, and as we adapt, and if we could sort of come together and have something that's unifying, this thing that we've created, if we could, now go, okay, we've done all the damage, let's come together to mitigate and adapt, and as a species. I mean, that's what I would really hope from humankind, that we could do that.
Well, the Paris Climate Accord was supposed to be something of a reflection of that effort, and then it was A, unenforceable, B, the countries that agreed to certain goals didn't meet them, didn't seem committed to meet them, and then COVID hit. And that threw all these countries into a tailspin. So you see that economic straits that these countries find themselves in, including this one, the U.S., they will ultimately dictate and trump any kind of, not Donald Trump, take precedence over, they'll take precedence over any kind of commitment, because when the economy starts spinning, people don't care about whatever environmental concerns we've pledged to honor. I mean, I think
right, but the fact is once we, co-workers.
You're saying once we've scaled up all of that. You're saying once we've started it, then it's started.
And all these co-workers. I mean, Joe Manchin's coal workers are saying, retrain us. I mean, and they're not saying necessarily in, renewables, but they want to be retrained because they see the writing on the wall. So the fact is, it actually makes total economic sense for us to do it. I mean, China wouldn't be, producing 85% of the world's solar panels and, half of the electric vehicles if it didn't make economic sense. I mean, this is the direction we need to go in and where we are going to, thrive and survive. But, they're about to have the next COP. It's in COP27. It's in Egypt. And a lot of the talk there is going to be about, okay, we're already in it, look at the world's weather and what's happening, how do we adapt? And then really, how does the global north take care of the global south? Pakistan, their emissions are, I think their total emissions, are just what the US put out in 1 year. I mean, and that's in the country's whole history. And then a third of their country was underwater for, a big portion of this year. So those are the things that are going to be discussed now. And
well, who's missing that? Who says it's, it may be, a lot of this stuff may be discussed, but there's not enough of a commitment on it. Is that Greta Thunberg, who's sort of become, she's like the Belinda Waymouth of the next generation. She's, she's dedicating her life to these messages. And she thinks this, the next COP meeting, which is, as you say, it's going on in Egypt. She thinks that it's just, it's bankrupt of any kind of real commitment from countries. You're saying, no, not really. Once the process is started, actually it continues and gets some momentum. I'm so sorry to float that, and then I want to ask you in the chat something about seaweed being the answer to the burping cow. Nick says the burping cow problem could be, I heard a mixture containing seaweed can reduce the harmful emissions from cow burps. Can you give us 30 seconds on that?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, seaweed is seen as being this, huge potential. I mean, we need to be eating more of it. There's this amazing guy, Bryn, I can't remember his last name, but he's doing aquaculture, these vertical farms in the ocean on the eastern seaboard. And part of it is seaweed, and then it's also mollusks, and it's this whole new way of eating. And seaweed is a big part of it. And I have heard that thing about seaweed in the cow food. I mean, basically, we need less cows, and they should not be fed grain. They should be on pasture. And that's also, would be a huge way if you actually let animals graze and migrate the way the bison used to on the great, plains of America. I mean, that was a big carbon sink. We could actually be going, in the opposite direction rather than the direction we're going in with the cows.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we're so off course when it comes to agriculture and the natural processes associated with agriculture. That we have processes, protocol.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
Yeah, but we're way away from them is the problem. You can find Belinda Waymouth on social media. Belinda Waymouth, Waymouth, and I think
before we let her go.
Yeah.
I was hoping to ask her a question because I saw this study last night.
Kim, how are you?
And I wanted to ask Belinda if you've seen this study out of Stanford. It was published, I think it was published yesterday, and it shows that whales are eating up to 10 million microplastics a day, kind of continuing our microplastic conversation from last week. But now they're saying that the krill have the digestive systems, I guess, to process microplastic. The problem is the whales come along and eat the krill, and they're eating this massive amount of microplastics, and they don't know, according to the study, what the long-term effects of that will be.
Well, as we were discussing the last 2 weeks, I mean, we could spend, months talking about plastic, because it's all the toxins that adhere to a plastic particle that then you get inside you. And, we know that this is happening with human beings. We know that the pieces of plastic are small enough to cross the intestinal wall. They say they're headed for our, liver and kidneys. And of course, they're going to be affecting, they say that the plankton in the ocean, and, krill is a zooplankton, that they're not growing as big as they did. They're not having the offspring that they produce are not as robust because of the amount of plastic that they're ingesting. And so as it bioaccumulates, meaning, you know, the krill eats a little amount and then a whale eats, you know, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of, you know, krill. And so then there's more and more plastic as you go up the food chain in a bigger and bigger animal. We just have to, we have to come up with alternatives to plastic, and we have to stop using as much, and we have to get, you know, the producers to take responsibility, because what's happening in the ocean and terrestrially with plastic is just bad. And you know, research will reveal what it's doing to us, you know, and that will, you know, I imagine becoming very soon, you know, now that we know that it, you know, how much is in us and how much we're consuming and everything.
We've toxified the environment, and we've toxified our bodies with all the plastic.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
It really is. And I'm afraid it is shortening lives. It's producing cancers. It's producing all the other diseases that are related to those toxins. We do have to wrap up. As I was saying, Belinda Waymouth is Waymouth. I love speaking with you. The audience loves you as well. If you have any thoughts, even in replay, if you leave them in the chat, we will try to get them into our conversation with Belinda next week. Belinda, thank you so much. Belinda Waymouth, everybody. Thanks, Belinda.
Bye.
Belinda.